Okay. Alrighty, so I do have my Strathmore 18 by 24 inch paper. Okay. Now I would, if depending on my orientation, let's say if my drawing is a more sort of horizontal composition, I will then change my actual sheet of paper to a horizontal composition. But because of my reference being more vertical, I'm going to flip it to a vertical orientation. Okay. Did that make sense? Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about materials. I have my blue painter's tape. I have my 24-inch aluminum ruler. Okay. I have my white eraser. And then where's my kneaded eraser? I need to grab my kneaded eraser. I have some paper towels. This will be your best friend. This is extremely useful. Okay. I have my my vine charcoal, that's black. My compressed charcoal, that's black. And then my white compressed charcoal. That is all you need in this process. Again, I do have a whole bunch of extra just in case. Again, if let's say worst comes to worst, if you ever do need the charcoals, I brought some of my, from my office, but I do have a lot of extra just in case. So if you do need them, don't wait last minute to go purchase them or let me know. Try to let me know ASAP if you cannot purchase them, and then you can come pick them up on on campus if you do need some. Okay, so I'm going to put that on the side. Okay, I'm just putting it on my left hand side, and I'm actually going to, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to tape a sort of a 1.5 inch, maybe 2 inch border around my paper. So let me do that now. So I'm using my blue painter's tape, and it doesn't have to be exact measurements. It does not. Okay, I'm making it slightly larger, but depending on your actual image, I'm going to use my entire sheet of paper. So keep that in mind. Again, I'm just using my blue painter's tape to kind of use as a sort of grid. Doesn't have to be, again, precise. You can just eyeball it. You don't have to like calculate inch by inch. You don't have to do that. That'll be a waste of time. But really, it's about the work itself and how you use your actual tape, charcoal. That's more important than the tape. The tape is just a sort of guide to kind of keep your edges clean. So when you remove the tape, then you'll be able to have a nice sort of crisp drawing to either put away as well as to kind of sign or label or date at the bottom. Just come around. Now, and before I start, how is the lighting? Can you guys see well? Is this difficult to see or no?
It's all right.
Okay. I'm going to turn on some light. You let me know if this is better. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. It's brighter.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty. Now, again, before I start, I have my vine. The vine is the one that's really, really light. That is sort of curved as a circle. Okay. You can break it to multiple pieces. Okay. The compress is the one that's slightly heavier and it's darker. You could also break that. Okay. But it's more square. Okay. But we'll use that slightly later. And then as well as the compressed white, we'll break that. So I have multiple pieces that I can use. Okay. Now for this, again, preliminary drawing, let me pull up my reference. Let's see, here it is. Okay. Okay. I will now just sort of, for the base of this assignment, start off with those early exercises, and then I'll do another drawing for the final completed still life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grid this into 4. Okay. I'll do one drawing here, one drawing here, one drawing here, and one drawing here. So what I can do is I'm just going to divide my paper again into 4. Again, they don't have to be perfect measurements at all.
Before you start, I had a quick question.
Go ahead. Remember, guys, state your name so I know.
Oh, yeah, sorry, this is Bella.
Go ahead.
I had a question about the materials. So I have like charcoal pencils left over from a previous art, like I just found them in my house. do you want us to use like, is it okay if they're a pencil, or do you want us to use like the actual charcoal?
I would say, Bella, for the sake of the assignment, if you can try to get some charcoal, just because the charcoal pencil will limit your flexibility, and that may actually hinder the drawing. It is more precise if you're working with a charcoal pencil, but I mean, I can't tell anybody what to do or not to do, but for the sake of this assignment, ideally, if you can, try to get the materials that it's on the supply list, because just for the sake of understanding how we use the vine, the compress, and a part of that we'll use, like, for example, the side of our compress in our vine to kind of experiment with different textures and surfaces. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I start? Okay. Now I'm going to zoom in to the camera from the first drawing. Okay. We'll start off here. Can I get a volunteer that can time me for 2 to 3 minutes? Or unless I can do it myself.
I can do it for you.
Okay.
This is Dio.
Oh, thank you, Dio. Alrighty, so I'm going to start off. Everybody can see number 1.
You want 2 minutes?
Yeah, it's in about a few seconds, I'll tell you to hit go and then just let me know, say, okay, start. And then I'll start off with my first drawing. Again, for this preliminary draft, what I'm doing, again, I'm working with 2 to 3 minutes on my first iteration. I'll do 3 to 4, 5 to 7, 8 to 10. Okay. I want all of us to do this on our own individual drawings, okay, from your own still lifes. If you have any difficulties with that, you could do what I'm doing now as practice, but later by next week, as well as the remainder of this week, try to make your 4 submitted drafts as well as your completed drawing as your submission for next week's critique. Okay. We won't critique these drawings. These are just for sort of understanding how you sort of start this process, but also it will let me know that you were able to practice those time drafts before you started your actual drawings itself. I'm not using the grid at all. I'm going to use freehand and we'll go from there. Questions so far? Okay. And then Dio, give me 1 second. Let me just make sure my reference is up. Okay. I'm ready. You are?
Okay, starting
Okay.
now.
So what I'm doing, I'm using my vine charcoal to make a very sort of loose composition of my still life. And I'm going very quickly. And what I'm doing is really figuring out the composition first. I'm not worrying about any detail. And ideally, I'm trying to figure out where things are. And I'm trying to map everything of where it is within the framework of my drawing. And then I'll go back and then start off with adding more details later. But these iterations, these practice drawings are really going to help you frame your ideas down on paper. And the reason why I want you guys to do this is because it eliminates that problem that a lot of students have of not only starting, but also thinking about what I want from my drawing, as well as how I start and then how I finish the work. Dio, how am I doing on time?
You have 33 seconds.
Okay. Also using my fingers to kind of blend in some of those areas, just for some darks and lights. And let me know when I'm timed.
Three, two, 1, done.
So what I've done is made a very basic rough draft, 2 to 3 minute drawing. That was 2 minutes, correct, Dio? or 3 minutes?
That was 2 minutes.
I'm gonna write down 2 minutes up there. For my first preliminary draft, I'm gonna do the same thing now to the next drawing, which will be right here. And about, we'll do 4 minutes here. 3 to 4 minutes.
Okay, I have it set for 4.
Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing. Just lower this on that drawing here, okay? Any questions so far? Okay.
Do you approach this differently, or do you start similarly to how you did before?
I'm going to be much more aware and conscious about those smaller details that I didn't do on my first draft, meaning my darks and lights mainly. You'll start to see, and then when we start on this process, that it's going to be slightly more refined and slightly more recognizable. Okay. Dio, let me know when you're ready.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay. So what I've learned is from that basic drawing, the first iteration, is that I was very loose. Okay. But now I'm starting to be more aware of my composition. And now I can start to think much more refinedly, but then also have fun with having some more darks and lights. There's that arched object. There's that other side. This one's at a slight foreshortened angle. Right up there. And the vine is a really great exercise to work with. Okay? Because a part of that is really getting, again, familiar with the materials. Here are my shallots, shallot number 1. This shallot slightly larger. Notice I'm applying more pressure, it's darker. Okay. But I'm really not focusing on what? Those details yet. Just trying to roughly make my composition. Notice that white crystal here has more darks. I'm applying a more value, right? You could also, I'm gonna massage some of that charcoal. Kind of get a nice sort of gradient. There's that bell. And that bell is slightly, I would say more here. There you go. It's foreshortened. Use the side of my compressed. Dio, let me know how I'm doing on time.
You're exactly halfway through.
Okay. There's that jewelry box. It's slightly more down here. And then the bust. Really, really loose. And this sort of really interesting Greco-Roman bust that was actually somebody gave me is starting to, crack and chip, which I kind of like. Ooh, I went over.
You have 1 minute.
I'm gonna add more text on the back. And now, so sort of those really interesting shapes of the drape. That bell is here. Now I'm going over those marks. Again, it doesn't have to be done. These are just rough drafts. Really have fun in these process, guys.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Complete.
Okay. So this was 3 minutes?
That was 4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay. Now let's jump to third iteration. Just adjust the camera.
You want 6 minutes?
Yeah, we'll do 6. And I'm actually gonna now do, I'm gonna incorporate my compressed as well, just for the sake of the demo. Okay. Give me, is that good? You guys can see that? Okay. Alrighty, let me know when you're ready.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Okay. I'm using my vine side. And I'm gonna practice with a different technique. I'm just gonna use the side and then go over it with my compressed. And again, this goes back to Bella, your question about that charcoal pencil is that if you use that instead of this, you won't have the ability to use your side, which is, again, it's completely okay, but I want you to sort of see what you can make with experimenting on the side from left to right, so on and so forth. But I like the fact that it's getting a lot more looser. I'm having fun with my charcoal. It's not inundating or making me frustrated. So then now I'm switching to my compressed. Compressed is going to be a lot darker. So for example, I made a line that runs through right about there. You can see how dark that is. Okay. It's going to be a lot trickier to erase too. But with these iterations, try not to erase. Go over it again and again. Have fun with this process, guys. This is just a rough draft. Okay. Now I'm worrying about a little bit more details. Crystals right about here. I think that's an amethyst stone, if I'm not mistaken.
You're at 4 minutes.
Using the compressed side, you can see here of that stone, but then you can see how dark that is, which is really fun. But then bust in here.
You're at 3 minutes.
I have 3 minutes left.
Correct.
Okay. I have a lot of time. Not going to use the edge of that almost as a pencil, but then you can see when you darken that, it gets really, really dark, which is fantastic.
By the way, I really like this display of the 4 different time periods and you using the materials differently.
Yeah. Again, guys, this is just an exercise. So when we're all doing this on our own drawings, you'll start to see it's just wrapping your head around not only the assignment, but you can really get familiar with some of those materials and you'll be able to be like, oh, now charcoal's not as intimidating as I thought. This is just a really dirty process, but I love doing this because it really helps you frame your ideas down, okay? And a part of that is sort of just, again, having fun with these materials. You don't have to, we're not worrying about realism. We're not worrying about details yet. Just trying to get our composition down. So now I have a good idea of how I can make my composition. And I'm making it really, really dark and really, really light on both surfaces, because I want to get really knit and gritty on those areas so I can then be able to go back and then say, oh, I need to change the surface or make this smaller, make this larger, so on and so forth. You can start to see I'm adding more rich darks. But then if I went back and erased, try not to erase, but you can if you want to. You could actually add some highlights. You can blend some of those areas away or blend
1 minute.
blending them into that surface. So for example, I want to make a highlight there. You can.
Was it a normal eraser or was that the putty eraser?
That was actually the white eraser. I don't know where I put my Kneaded. We'll talk a little bit about the Kneaded when we get into the drawing, final drawing.
I never realized you could do that. I always tried to use the putty in like teeny tiny little spots.
Oh yeah, you definitely can.
You have 30 seconds.
Oh, sorry, my camera moved. I apologize. And again, guys, sometimes the quality is not the best on my camera. I do apologize because I'm using my phone. You guys might have better technology than me. So by all means, have fun with that. And now I'm going to use
4, 3, 2, 1.
Perfect. Now you can start to see my hand is really, really dirty. My finger, my index and my middle and my thumb are getting really dirty, which is completely okay. But if you do not want to do that, you're more than happy to use gloves. Okay, let's go to final draft. And this is for, get that straight. Let's do 8 minutes. Hold on. Yeah. I'm going to use just compressed here. We'll see how that goes. All right, ready? Actually, hold on. Is the camera okay?
Yep.
Okay, deal. I'm ready when you are.
3, 2, 1.
Okay. I'm gonna use my compressed. And notice I always start off with that center. You don't necessarily have to, but it helps me kind of be aware of what's going to be in the center of my drawing. I'm sort of like almost stippling to make my forms now. Do you see that? Again, just experimenting with different methods. My shallots. Slightly big there, I'm gonna make it smaller. And notice I can start to see those lines on the shallots. Gently blend that. I'm really, really gently blending. I'm not being aggressive about it. But if you are, it's okay. This is the composition is good.
You have 6 minutes left.
6 minutes. Oh, I gotta move faster. This is what happens. See, I'm now focused too much on that detail, and that's gonna happen, which is okay. But again, that timing yourself is gonna help you. There's the bell. There's the jewelry box. There's little decorative motifs on the jewelry box because I think it's from India, if I'm not mistaken. Just make sure my bell is good underneath the bell. And I always sometimes when I apply a lot of pressure, you can start to see your drawing could smudge on those surfaces, which is okay. But if you don't want that, always take a piece of paper towel, okay? And you can always put on onto your surface. You can and then rest your arm directly on, so then you can work on this side of the drawing, hypothetically, right? So that's why the paper towels are very, very useful.
Do you find the paper towels to be more useful than paper?
Yeah.
I see a lot of influencers using charcoal on YouTube and things like that, and they use paper, but I was curious, you tend to use the paper towels, so I was wondering if you liked it more.
I mean, it goes both ways. I mean, it's the best way to know is to experiment and see what works for you. I think paper towels have worked for me throughout the past, but I've used paper before, and I don't know, something about the paper towels. It's just because I'm sort of used to it. It's helpful, but if you want to use the paper to blend it, you can do that as well. I like to use my fingers mainly because it's, there's no better material than your hands. There really isn't.
4 minutes.
Draw the bust.
Can I ask a quick question? This
Yes.
is Rachel.
Rachel.
Just to double check, because I think I was under the mistaken impression that Still Life was due this Thursday, but is it due later than that?
It's due Monday.
Okay, cool. Okay, thanks.
It's Monday. Yeah. Where did you see Thursday?
I think I got it mixed up with like one of my other classes that I have an assignment due on Thursday.
Oh, no worries. It's okay.
Like I didn't say that anywhere.
Three minutes.
Slightly wider. A little too dark to see.
You have 2 minutes.
Oop, sorry, the paper's moving. On that stone.
1 minute.
Oh, I gotta go fast.
Kind of wish I had the show 24's beeping noise for the background noise.
Oop, sorry, moving my.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Was hitting my camera. I do apologize. Okay. So now let's zoom out. So this is what I want you guys to do. Okay. And this took us what? Just a few minutes. Okay. As a whole, we have 2, 4, 6, and then 8. I want you to, think about in terms of those times as 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 5 to 7, 8 to 10. Okay. All of this will be submitted as well as your completed drawings by next week. Now let's switch to the larger sheet of paper. Any questions about this process so far? You could start to see how loose the beginning was and how it starts to change to get a lot darker and much more refined. It's a little bit difficult to see in this drawing. But now let's get to the big sheet of paper. 1 second. So now we're going to use the grid. How's the, hold on, let me move this. There you go. How's the camera? You guys can see? Now,
Yes, they work. That's good.
perfect, thank you. Blue painter's tape. Again, your tape is your best friend. And there's no need to wash your hands because you're going to continue working on this. But if you do want to, by all means.
This is Dio. I do have another question.
Go ahead.
On a piece with charcoal, do you find that typically there's no space that doesn't have charcoal on most pieces? Like there's always like a little bit of the toning in the background?
Sometimes, depending on actually the reference, but you can, I mean, worst comes to worst, you could always go back and remove it with some erasers, but then it depends on the image. Do you have your, are you going to work with this still life, Dio?
I think I'm going to do the still life. Yeah, I think I've always stuck with this one since I like charcoal the most.
Okay.
I think I kind of want to review with you the 2 past ones that I did and where I found I did well, what I struggled with, and then maybe kind of just figure out what type of piece to put together that challenges me to refine those mess ups that I did before.
Absolutely. I was going to say, because like after the demo, you can send me your image and then we can go from there.
Cool.
Okay. How we grid.
I'll do that now and message you the images on Canvas.
Perfect. Let me hold the camera. Okay. 1 second. Y'all can see this already. Now we're for the grid. Hopefully, if the paper does move, let me know, like on the camera, just in case if I don't see it. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to mark it from the bottom left all the way up to the top right. And just make a vertical line. Oop, hold on. With my vine. Okay. Do the same thing to the opposite side. Make a big X on your drawing. Those of you who are following along, by all means, I would highly recommend doing this. Okay. So I have my X. Okay. Just move these. I'm going to make a horizontal line. Make sure it's straight on this side, so it can't be off as an angle. It must be a 90-degree angle. Okay. Make a horizontal line that goes to the middle. Oop. Hold on. My ruler went slightly above. I need to erase this because that's going to throw it off. You want to make it as close as possible to the center. And that's okay if it erases some of the previous lines. Right there. And I'm going to make a vertical line that runs to the center. And let me know if you guys have any difficulty doing this. This should be an easy process. Okay. So far, so good. Any questions about this so far? Now I'm going to make another horizontal line here, another one here, and I'll make another set of X's on all four. So I'm just going to jump here. You want to start off with those X's first from both diagonal lines. So then it gets a lot easier to find that center. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing here. Do the same thing here. So that's
Do you find this method to be easier to use rather than just the squares?
yeah, because depending on your reference, it may be longer or shorter. That's also another factor too, because let's say if my reference was a lot more elongated, I could then just use the grid directly when I'm drawing it on my reference, and it will adjust it to my paper. So then I can measure them length times width. But for the measurements that I have in my 18 by 24 Strathmore paper, it should be a sort of a nice geometric rectangle. So when you go back to the reference, and I'll show you guys back on my screen, it's oriented in a way that it's closer to my paper size. So it's 18 by 24. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be roughly around the same. And now the grid is useful to use when I'm when I'm making my drawing really large. Okay, depending on the actual reference. Then I'll show you guys how to do that too. Let me make a reference to here.
And this is the vine.
This is the vine. Yeah, thank you. I forgot to say that. Thank you, yeah. And this is the vine charcoal. And now I have a basic grid. Okay. Now I could also add another horizontal line here, and I can actually make another X here to make it a lot more refined. You don't necessarily have to do that. This should be a very basic format that anybody can use. Okay. Now, let me really fast just wash my hands because I need to switch over to the image. Give me 1 second. So what I'm now going to do is screen share the reference one more time so you guys can have an idea of exactly how I'm seeing this in the relationship to the drawing. So again, to be mindful, I am now looking at this and thinking about how I can start to then use my grid to actually create my drawing on my paper. And notice, the length and the width, depending on the, how wide the drawing is, or how wide the reference is, or how wide or how tall it is, really factors in. So that's why in these process, you want to crop or start to edit down your reference. Now I made this grid a little bit earlier, but now what I could do even further is, again, I just take my my little drawing tool here on this. I'm using Preview on my Mac, and start connecting this diagonal line here to this square. And you can see that green little dot centers it, which is really great. Make it a little bit bigger. Now do the same thing on the top and just move it down all the way here to the bottom. Just lower this right about there. And now here, now ideally you could have just moved this line to make it longer, but since it's already saved that way, I'll just move it here. That's right about there. And do the same thing here. Make another diagonal line that runs through here. you can kind of see that line needs to be adjusted right there. Do the same thing here. And that could also run through right over there. And you can slightly see right there, it locks in, which is great. Okay. So then now I then have a more manageable framework of how I can tackle each frame, meaning this is one, and this is one. You could even divide it even further. And then depending on my actual reference, and whether if it's more elongated, whether if it's wider or shorter, I can then change that orientation, meaning I can crop the image. But then just for the sake of this demo, just want to make sure that's right over there. Okay. There you go. Oop, it's actually slightly off, but hold on. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but the more perfect in terms of the correct geometry of how they all line up perfectly, the easier it is on your actual drawing. Okay. Now, then I'm going to go back to my camera. And I can then start to begin this process. Again, guys, a basic rule of thumb is to always start off with your vine. It is a lot easier to erase, a lot easier than your compressed. Then when we get into those highlights, oops, sorry, there's a bit of water on there. I don't know, maybe came hands, but when I wash them, you really want to be able to start off and really have a really early sort of sketch first, just to get your composition. You're not worrying about any detail, okay? So again, I'm going to start off with my vine, okay? Take your vine charcoal. Again, you want to follow along in this process if you can. And then let's start. So you can start off with the center. So that amethyst stone is right about what? Right about here. In the center of this square, I can start to see that sort of amethyst goes right about down here, goes right over here. But then there's also that bit of that fabric that goes juts over slightly to the right. And I'm just following that sort of composition. And again, now I have the shape of my amethyst. Okay. Now you could do the same thing here with the stone here, the crystal. And I'm just really lightly with my vine going over each object as a sort of a system. Okay. Again, you do not have to do the grid if you do not like to. Okay. So actually, this is slightly taller. Okay. But then now the arch of that called the bell, slightly bigger. So then now this goes right on here, then actually arches this way. And then on the bottom, it goes there. There's my bell. Same thing with the jewelry box. Slightly higher. And I can see this corner of this amethyst stone right about here meets up parallel to the object of the jewelry box. And I noticed a bit of the jewelry box gets cut off here, which is okay. There's my jewelry box. Same thing with, make sure that's correct. And then in that center, that's where I can put in my violet kind of amethyst shards that kind of like that are coming inwards. It's almost a really interesting structure on that base. And on this side, we have the arch. Let's do about there. It goes right through to the bottom. there. But then that sort of marbled ordinary presto is going to be right down. Notice I'm going over multiple times just to make sure the composition is good. Slightly downwards more. This one goes up, and there's a bit of a lip, which is interesting. And you'll start to see like the compress actually starts to crack, which is okay, because then you can blend that in there. And then right about here is where that other arched object is. And then right about here is where it begins on the other side. And again, I'm going to leave the grid on there, but you'll see how easy it is to erase with the white compressed. Excuse me, with the eraser, excuse me. Okay. Let's do this shallots. Get Elijah back in here. Oh, where's my image? Bottom here. The shallot is the bigger one. It's almost foreshortened, so it's closer to us. There's that little base here. And I'm actually going to add all that wonderful texture of the fabric, because the fabric is fantastic. And I want to showcase that. Now, if it was a white sort of, or just a basic colored fabric, you could just blend some of those shadows in there. But if it wasn't, then we could be able to go back and then actually add more variation. Now noticing that amethyst is slightly wider on this side, which is interesting. And then, so that's this shallot here, those lines. But then here is where the other shallot is. And I like the fact that there's this really interesting swirl on that shallot, which is fantastic. So then now, let's go to the bust. Wonderful hair. There's that line in the middle I want to get rid of. It's the socket right out here. Oop. It's okay, I can erase this. Guys, let me know if I'm going too fast. Here's my eraser. Now I can start to like erase some of those lines. You can start to see the face. Move some of those lines. See how easy it is to erase. You will have some remnants left of that, the vine, which is okay. Once you go over it with multiple values, you'll then be able to go back and actually add more darks around those lines.
Do you have any recommended advice for those that might spend too much time on details of one part of their art piece? Like how long you recommend a student to work on a certain area before moving to a different portion?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would recommend, depending on your drawing or your composition, you should probably spend around 3 to 4 hours around your work, your completed drawing. It's been, how long has it been here? 10 minutes, 20 minutes? I'm not keeping track of time, I apologize, but
About, yeah.
somewhere around there. So if it's too complicated, if it's too much of images or objects that are too difficult for you to tackle, then you can simplify it, you know? You don't have to necessarily do what I'm doing or do what anybody else is doing. So if you want to simplify your drawing, a good rule would be around 3 to 4 hours, to be honest. If it's done within an hour, I mean, even if it's done within an hour or 30 minutes, it could be a wonderful work of art. So time isn't really the issue. Is time becomes the problem where students are losing. So for example, if we're losing time or if we're procrastinating, I'm not saying that anybody will, but if we did, then you lose too much of it. So then you won't be able to then go back and then be able to have the ability to make changes or correct your actual drawing. And it really just varies. And Dio, I don't know if that answers the question because it factors within the work. Like you'll see it if a work of art can use more time on it, but a good rule of thumb would be around 3 to 4 hours, to be honest. I hope that helps.
More asking so no one gets paralysis in their art piece and doesn't finish. I
Oh,
figured it was a good question.
That's a perfect question. Thank you for asking. And that does happen. And Dio's absolutely right. And so we will encounter that problem as a class, right? We will encounter some of the difficulties of maybe losing that time that could have been used much more efficiently, right? To work on certain sections of the drawing. I'm just erasing the grid so you can start to see it a little bit better. I'm just using.
Next question is Kristen.
Go ahead, Krista.
Which eraser are you using? And is there one that's better to use than the other for that?
Yeah, I'm using my white eraser. I can't, for some odd reason, I can't find my Kneaded eraser. I had it on my desk. Let me look for it one more time. Hold on, I think no, I do not have it. Huh, where did I put it? The Kneaded eraser is sort of like a putty, very useful, necessary tool to use when you're erasing or making textures. It's sort of a gray box, by the way, a gray sort of little square that you could kind of press and mold into whatever sort of shape you want. You can make it into a ball and you actually can use that as an erasing tool. The white eraser actually removes much more of the compress. So I'm just using the white because this is apparently all I have. I cannot find for the life of me my Kneaded eraser. It's okay. Well, actually, whoever has the Kneaded eraser at the end of the demo will actually, if you can, try to put it on your camera so everybody gets an idea. Dio, do you have your Kneaded eraser?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And if you don't mind, would you mind showing it after class or after the demo?
I don't mind.
Perfect, thank you. But that's actually really useful to use too, but it's, I don't know why I cannot find a Kneaded eraser. Okay. So, is this difficult to see? It's kind of hard to see on this end.
No,
But-
it's very nice and easy to see.
Okay. Let me just take a paper towel to remove some of that excess erasing marks. Now, you know, again, this is fine. So if I move my hand across directly, it will actually smear. So I got to be really careful.
So the kneaded eraser usually I think most of the time it comes in like a little square like this.
Mhm.
And then I have one that has been wrapped for probably a few months now, but it's kind of like, it's like sticky clay Play-Doh. And then it's kind of therapeutic too when you're working with a certain area. You can continue to keep stretching it and working it in, and then it gets like soft and stickier almost, and then it picks up more charcoal.
Yeah. And what I can do, I can just take my drawing like near some trash and then just kind of gently move all that excess erasing mark, because you don't want all that on there because that might smear even further. I'm just gently using the side. You can start to see that paper towel is picking up so much of that excess eraser. I'm just moving it to the right, just to remove, get a nice clean surface. But how does the composition on your guys' end look? Does this look okay on the camera? Can you guys see it? I know it's a little rough.
Looks good.
If it's difficult to read, just let me know. I'll try to zoom in the camera. So then now I have a good composition. So then now I can tackle the darks and lights, okay? Within this process, now remember, a good rule of thumb would be your compressed is your darks, okay? So if I'm using my compressed, I'm gonna start using a little bit as a sort of variation. Just using the side, kind of working around, okay? Just darkening some of those areas. I'm gonna use my fingers. And you'll see while you're doing this, if you're doing this at the same time with me, during the class time, you can see how dark that is, right? It's pretty dark, which is okay depending on your reference. Like if it's too dark, then we need to fix it. If it's too light, then we can't really go back because this is where it gets really dark. Okay, but then it could be used to your advantage. Now I have a bunch of drapery in the back, and I want to be able to show all those folds and bent and those curves in the background. But within the sake of the demo, I'll sort of slightly make a sort of abstract rendition of that background, just so you guys can get your head around the assignment. But then I'll sort of gradually move my compressed charcoal on the side and kind of make those folds as sort of a gesture. So meaning like I'm going to make these marks to kind of indicate that's a fold there. Okay, you guys can see that. You also see. Now I can blend those areas in. And once I do that, what happens? The objects move forward because they're lighter. Okay, and that's a really interesting, useful tip to use, right? So you really want to sort of indicate where those shadows are. So that, for example, if the base of the bust of that Greco-Roman sculpture is pretty dark, I'm going to add some dark on the bottom, right? Just to kind of highlight like that. It's actually kind of receding into that perspectival space from those sort of lines, as well as kind of indicating that that's where the sides of those darks are. You see that? Now that's the base. But then now, let's say, for example, right around the bell, I'm just being mindful. I don't want to overlap my composition, meaning I don't want to go over those lines I just made. Adding some darks here. Okay. Then adding just a little bit of light. Depending on the amount of pressure, I'm adding very light amount of pressure, okay? Very, very light. And now I'm gonna take my fingers and just, I'm gonna massage it into my paper. You could feel it. You could feel that surface. It's very smooth compared to here where it gets a little bit smoother because there's a lot of charcoal in there. Do you see that? But then now, oh, you know what? I'm noticing this crystal is a lot bigger. Excuse me, hold on. I'm gonna correct that actually. Guys, if I go too fast, just let me know, okay? Now, for example, if I went over that line and I made a compressed value there, if I take my eraser and just gently apply a little bit more pressure, you can slightly remove that mark. Just what you want to do from those early marks that we made, this is sort of medium amount of pressure, this is really light, you could erase, right? Let's say if you wanted to make a highlight from the bell, like make that line a lot more cleaner. You can do that, just slowly take your white eraser and then remove some of that compressed charcoal. Okay, do you see that? And then same thing here. Now, if it's too light or too dark, I can then remove more. But then I could also take my white eraser as a tool and start making some shapes. And the reason why I wanted to do this is because you could use your tools of your eraser to make some really interesting abstract forms of the background. So you can build upon some texture because there's a lot of really interesting embroidery in the background. Okay, but then you can start to really be sort of cautious of where those lights and darks are. Then later when I go back, I'll then refine some of those areas. You can see how dark that is. It goes dramatically dark. So it's just something to keep in mind for. Just have to be cautious because this is going to be a lot more trickier to erase. And now if I go back and actually start erasing some of those areas. The nose of the bus is broken, which is interesting. But then I also want to add a little bit more value here. And you can use your compress as an actual pencil, meaning you can hold it as a pencil like this instead of on the side. There's a bunch of lines that runs through here, and there's an interesting fold down here. There's a sort of squiggles marks here. I'm just gonna blend that whole thing. You have a nice sort of abstract background in the back. And then here is where you want that sort of side to be as well. What questions do we have so far?
Are you also going to, sorry, this is Dio. Are you also going to show an example of using the white charcoal and how that looks when mixed with black charcoal?
Let's actually do that right now. Thank you for reminding me, Joe. I always forget my white compressed. But now, just refine this bowl. This is, I think this is made out of marble, so I want to make it a little bit lighter. And then let me make this. Again, I'm using my fingers to kind of wrap around, in and out. Massage this in here. And you can feel it. You can feel the charcoal on your skin, which is interesting, because then you can be able to see, okay, I can blend more of that in, less of that, depending on how much darks and lights you want to add. Slightly smaller. And then now we're going to use our compressed white. Now the compressed white is a really helpful highlight. Okay. Now when you're using your compressed white, just be mindful that it does come off cooler. Okay. There's almost a cooler gray to this material. Just remove some of these. Just lower this. Start to see it. That should be a lot brighter. There you go. Okay. Where's my compressed? Okay. So I'm going to go over this area here with a little bit more of a compressed. But before, I'm just going to darken this slightly. And I'm actually going to make a very light value over it with the compressed. And I'm going to blend that. Let's see if that's a sort of a medium gray, right? If I take my compressed white and go over that highlight. Now you could use it as a pencil. Again, you could hold it like as actual pencil to make some sort of direct, straighter curves and lines. It almost gets cooler within the surface of the white paper. Can you guys see that? I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but if you have your compressed, start experimenting with it, with the white, because then you'll start to see it comes off a lot cooler. But that actually could work depending on your reference. Let's say if it was too much white, you can always go back. Actually, you can also apply a little bit more pressure and you'll start to see it get a little bit brighter. But then when you blend it into that charcoal compressed, it gets a lot grayer and cooler. You can see how cool that is in relationship to the rest of the drawing. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then now you could also go back and actually add some middle lights over the compressed. Even I've seen a lot of stippling. I'm just doing this for the sake of the demo. A lot of sort of cross hatching. You could also blend it back to kind of get an interesting gray. That could actually help to your advantage, depending on how dark or how light your objects are in relationship to one another. Okay. What time is it? It's about 3:50. Okay. I'm going to leave this be. I'm going to continue working on this. And then by the end of class, or by the end of today, excuse me, I'll have that uploaded on the modules tab. Let's actually move back to, I'll leave this up. And then we'll talk a little bit more about questions and concerns we may have about the assignment. But before we do, let me just wash my hands.
crayon sounds like a fun idea. I've been debating doing the pastel crayons or the pastel. I've liked those as a kid, but those are fun to blend as well.
Yeah.
I haven't used pastels in such a long time, but I have so many crayons. They're so cheap. You just buy like a huge thing of them and it's like $10 or something. There's just tons of them. So I have like a billion and I love using them. They just feel so nice and
Can you
the color
blend
is
them
really
using-
strong. They're great.
Can you
Huh?
blend them using like a blow dryer? So you get like
I haven't tried that, but you probably could.
I mean, I don't see why not.